forest of Zion 9 held its breath, silent and still, as shadows lengthened across alien plant life under the dimming light of two suns. Hidden within the heart of this lush wilderness, a solitary cabin lay nestled among towering trees, its worn with a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of the surrounding vegetation. This was the retreat of Kai, a man once dreaded across galaxies, now living in isolation by choice. His broad, muscular form moved skillfully through the forest, carrying a recently hunted garca draped over his shoulders. The creature's shimmering scales caught the last light, a testament to his skill. His hands, scarred and toughened by years of battle, held the creature securely. Approaching his cabin, Kai's sharp gray eyes swept over the area, a habit from his days of constant vigilance. The slender dagger-shaped earring in his left ear caught the light, a reminder of his war-torn past. Around his neck hung long prayer beads, a strikingly serene adornment for someone once known as a terror of the galaxy. Using his foot, Kai nudged the door open, his movements smooth and measured. The cabin's interior was plain, revealing little more than a desire for simplicity. He stopped in his tracks, every muscle tense, as his gaze fell upon a figure sprawled across the rough wooden floor, an unconscious woman. Her skin, a vibrant shade of green, marked her as distinctly alien. Her once elegant clothing was torn and streaked with thick, purple fluid blood, he guessed. "Just my luck," he muttered under his breath, his voice low and gravelly. For a brief moment, he considered dragging her outside and vanishing into the forest. But something made him hesitate. With a heavy sigh, he set down his kill and knelt beside her. Her breathing was faint and uneven, and a deep wound stretched across her side. Kai's battle-worn hands, unaccustomed to gentleness, carefully inspected the injury. "You'd better be worth this trouble," he grumbled, reaching for a medkit tucked beneath a loose floorboard. As he cleaned and bandaged the wound, his thoughts drifted to the life he'd left behind. The thrill of the hunt, the constant game of outsmarting entire planetary forces, all sacrificed for a quiet solitude. The woman stirred faintly but remained unconscious. Kai finished his work, then stood, stretching his powerful frame as he glanced one last time at his unexpected guest. Setting his attention on the garca, he prepared a meal. At least one of them would eat well tonight. With the first light of dawn casting the sky in soft hues of lavender and red, Kai sat in silence, his prayer beads slipping between his fingers, each bead a memory of the lives he'd taken, the worlds he'd scarred. It was a ritual of reflection, perhaps even a way to atone. A faint groan pulled him back to the present. His eyes snapped open, instantly locking on the alien woman as she began to awaken. Kai remained seated, his exterior calm but his body tense, ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises of swirling gold. She blinked, clearly disoriented, until her gaze found Kai. They held each other's stare in silence for a long moment. "Where?" she managed, her voice raspy. "You're in my cabin," Kai replied, his tone brisk. "You were hurt. I patched you up." The woman tried to sit up, grimacing as her wound tugged painfully. Kai didn't move to help, his expression one of detached interest. "Thank you," she murmured, her golden eyes examining him closely. "I am Leia. Might I know the name of my rescuer?" Kai's lips curved into a humorless smirk. "Rescuer? Huh? That's a new one. Name's Kai. And now that you're conscious, it's time for you to leave." Leia frowned, her green skin crinkling in puzzlement. "Leave? But I've barely." "Not my concern," Kai interrupted, standing up with practiced grace. "I prefer my solitude." Leia, still wincing, managed to get to her feet. "Please, I owe you for your kindness. I'd like to repay the favor." Kai raised an eyebrow. "Repay me? And exactly how do you plan on doing that?" Leia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Well, I'm sure a strong, handsome human like you has some ideas." Kai froze, caught off guard. Before he could respond, Leia broke into laughter, clutching her side as she chuckled. "Oh, your face," she exclaimed, her voice filled with amusement. "You didn't actually think I meant that, did you? So quaint." Kai's expression hardened. "And what's so amusing about that?" Leia's laughter softened, though her eyes still glimmered with mirth. "The idea of coupling for enjoyment instead of reproduction, it's such a primitive concept, almost endearing in its simplicity." Kai opened his mouth to respond, but a sound outside cut him off. His posture shifted slightly, his senses going on full alert. Leia noticed the change, and her expression instantly became serious. "They found me," she whispered, fear darkening her voice. Kai moved to the window with quiet precision. Outside, a squad of heavily armed figures was closing in on the cabin. Their armor displayed the emblem of the Galactic Enforcement Division, a symbol Kai knew all too well. "Friends of yours?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. Leia shook her head. "Far from it. They've been tracking me across 3 star systems." Kai turned to face her, his face unreadable. Looks like my quiet life is over. Can you handle yourself in a fight? Leia blinked, startled by his calm tone. I can fight, but against them, we're outnumbered and outgunned. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Kai's face. Numbers are nothing. Guns are just toys for those without real skill. Stick close and you might learn something. Without waiting for a response, Kai headed for the door. His hand hovered on the handle as he looked back at Leia. And try to keep up. I don't run from fights. With that, he threw the door open and stepped outside, ready to meet the approaching threat. Leia, momentarily taken aback, hurried to follow. The leader of the armed group, a hulking Cronin with cybernetic implants, stepped forward, his gaze cold. Step aside, human, he snarled. We're here for the girl. This doesn't concern you, the Cronin snarled. Kai remained relaxed, almost looking disinterested. Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you. She's under my protection now, so I suggest you walk away. The Cronin's laugh was a low, grating sound. Protection? You and what army, human? Just me? Kai replied, cracking his knuckles. That should be plenty. The Cronin's amusement quickly turned to fury. Kill them both, he bellowed. What followed was a whirlwind of motion that Leia could barely follow. Kai moved with a speed and precision that seemed almost unnatural, weaving through laser fire as if it moved in slow motion. His fists and feet struck with pinpoint accuracy, each blow landing with devastating effect. Leia watched in awe as Kai systematically dismantled the entire squad with a deadly grace, rolling, dodging, and countering with fluid movements that seemed to defy the laws of nature. At one point, he even closed his eyes, relying on his other senses to dodge attacks and strike back. Getting bored yet? Leia called out, her tone a mixture of sarcasm and awe. Kai smirked, still keeping his eyes shut as he took down 2 more attackers, just leveling the playing field a bit. Wouldn't want them to feel completely outmatched. The Cronin leader, enraged by the sight of his team falling one by one, charged at Kai with a furious roar. Kai opened his eyes, a flicker of excitement crossing his face. Finally, something interesting. The Cronin's cybernetic arm whirred as he launched a punch that could shatter stone. But Kai didn't dodge. He caught the punch with one hand, sending a shockwave through the clearing. Impossible, the Cronin gasped. Kai's grip tightened, the metal creaking under the strain. You've got no idea what's possible. With a savage twist, Kai ripped the cybernetic arm clean off. The Cronin howled in agony, but Kai didn't relent, delivering a rapid series of blows to the alien's weak spots. In seconds, the once formidable leader crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The clearing fell silent. Kai stood among the fallen attackers, his breathing steady, every movement controlled. He turned to find Leia staring at him, a blend of fear and awe in her gaze. You're not just some recluse, are you? She whispered, barely audible. Kai shrugged, indifferent. I told you, I don't back down from fights. Leia shook her head, clearly trying to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. But how? I've never seen anyone fight like that. Who are you? Kai's expression darkened, memories of his past flickering in his eyes. Just someone who spent a lifetime becoming the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. He glanced around at the bodies littering the clearing. We need to go. There'll be more coming. Leia nodded, still in shock. Where will we go? We? Kai raised an eyebrow. Who said anything about we? You can't just abandon me. They'll keep coming and I can't face them alone, she pleaded. Kai sighed, running a hand through his close-cropped hair. Look, princess, I left that life behind. I'm not interested in playing hero or getting tangled up in whatever trouble you're dragging around. Leia's eyes sparked with determination. I'm not asking for a hero. I need a partner, someone to teach me to defend myself, to survive. In return, I can offer you something you've been missing for a long time. Oh yeah, Kai replied, clearly skeptical. And what might that be? A purpose, Leia said, her voice steady. A reason to use those skills for something other than hunting alien creatures and hiding in the woods. Kai paused, her words hitting deeper than he cared to admit. The prayer beads around his neck felt unusually heavy, a reminder of the life he'd been trying to leave behind. After a moment, he relented. Fine, he said gruffly, but we do this on my terms. No questions about my past, no attempts to turn me into some noble savior. I'll teach you how to survive, maybe even fight. When that's done, we part ways. Deal? Leia gave a small smile. Deal. But fair warning, I learn fast. You might even enjoy having me around more than you think. Kai snorted, heading toward the cabin to gather supplies. Don't count on it, grin. green. I gave up on enjoying anything a long time ago. As they prepared to leave, Leia watched him pack with swift, practiced movements. Despite his gruff exterior, she sensed a depth to this strange human that intrigued her. She had a feeling their journey together would be far more unpredictable and dangerous than either of them anticipated. Kai, meanwhile, tried to ignore the strange feeling rising within him. It had been years since he'd felt the thrill of impending action, the draw of the unknown. As much as he resisted, a small part of him welcomed this unexpected change to his exile. As the twin sons of Zion 9 dipped below the horizon, Kai and Leia ventured into the approaching darkness. The galaxy, it seemed, had other plans for the reformed villain and the enigmatic fugitive. Their story was just beginning, and the stars above seemed to watch, waiting for what would unfold. The sleek, stolen spacecraft glided through the dark expanse of space, its occupants an unusual pair of fugitives. Kai sat at the controls, his posture relaxed even with the threat of pursuit hanging over them. Beside him, Leia shifted restlessly, her green skin shimmering with tension. "Could you cut that out?" Kai muttered, his gaze still fixed on the starfield. "Your fidgeting's more irritating than a Gorgon flea swarm." Leia crossed her arms with a huff. "Well, forgive me for being a bit anxious. Not all of us can be stoic statues in the middle of a galactic manhunt." A faint smirk tugged at Kai's lips. "Statues don't walk, Green, and this isn't my first chase." Leia rolled her eyes. "Right, the mysterious past you refuse to talk about. Care to share a bit of that hard-won wisdom?" Kai's jaw clenched. "Rule number 1, don't ask about my past. Rule number 2, see rule number 1. Leia opened her mouth to reply, but the ship suddenly lurched, cutting her off. Kai's hands flew across the controls, every movement calm and precise. "What was that?" Leia gasped, clutching her seat. "Tractor beam," Kai said, his tone disturbingly composed. "Seems your friends have caught up." Leia's eyes widened with panic. "So, what now?" Kai's lips curled into a dangerous grin. "We give them exactly what they came for." Before she could protest, Kai shut off the engines. The ship shuddered as the tractor beam began to pull them toward a massive cruiser looming above. "Have you lost your mind?" Leia whispered sharply. "We're delivering ourselves right to them." Kai unbuckled his harness, stretching with nonchalance. "Relax, Green. This is all part of the plan." "What plan?" Leia demanded, incredulous. Kai winked. "The one where we take them down and steal their ship. I'm betting it's a nicer ride than this bucket." As their craft was pulled into the cruiser's docking bay, Kai's thoughts drifted to a distant memory. He remembered himself as a child, muscles trembling as he held a plank position under his grandfather's stern eye. "Weakness is death, boy," the old general had said. "Strength and cunning are what the galaxy respects. Never forget that." The docking clamps locked into place, snapping him back to the present. He turned to Leia, his expression suddenly serious. "Stay close and follow my lead, and do your best not to get hit. I'd rather not be patching you up again." The hatch hissed open, revealing a squad of armed troopers. Kai stepped out, hands raised in a mock surrender, a smug grin on his face. "Gentlemen," he drawled, "I believe you were looking for us." What happened next was a blur of motion that left Leia reeling. Kai moved like liquid lightning, disarming and incapacitating troopers with frightening skill. At one point, he even closed his eyes, evading blaster shots by sheer sound. "Show off," Leia muttered from behind a crate. Kai chuckled as he took down 3 more troopers effortlessly. "Just keeping things interesting. Care to join me, Green?" Leia emerged from cover, her moves far from Kai's level but still capable. Together, they swept through the docking bay, leaving a trail of fallen soldiers behind. "Not bad," Kai nodded approvingly. "You might just survive this." Leia rolled her eyes. "Your faith in me is overwhelming. What's next?" Kai gestured down the hallway. "Now we head for the bridge, commandeer this oversized metal can, and make our escape. Try to keep up." As they fought their way through the cruiser's corridors, Leia found herself in awe of Kai's abilities. He moved with an agility that seemed beyond human, sensing attacks before they happened, his every strike decisive. "How did you learn to fight like this?" Leia asked between skirmishes. Kai's expression grew dark. "Let's just say I had a very determined teacher." A memory surfaced. A teenage Kai, bruised and bloodied, facing off against a relentless combat droid. His grandfather's voice was cold and unyielding. Again, and this time, do it blindfolded. They reached the bridge, where Kai quickly subdued the crew and took the captain's chair. Leia watched him closely. "You know," she said carefully, "for someone who claims to have left violence behind, you seem pretty at home with it." Kai's hand paused on the controls. "Old habits die hard. hard, green. Don't confuse necessity with enjoyment. As they mapped their escape, Leia's curiosity got the better of her. So if you're such a fighter, why live in the woods? Why not use your skills for something, I don't know, noble? Kai gave a short, humorless laugh. Noble? There's no such thing in this galaxy. Just different shades of self-interest, dressed up as virtue. Leia frowned. That's a pretty bleak outlook. It's a realistic one, Kai replied, steering the cruiser out of the space dock. I've seen what lies behind all those so-called noble causes. Trust me, we're better off on our own. As they leapt into hyperspace, leaving their pursuers behind, Leia mulled over Kai's words. There was more to him than he let on, buried beneath his sarcasm and detachment. Over the following weeks, they moved from one planet to the next, staying a step ahead of their hunters. Kai began training Leia in earnest, pushing her to her limits. Again, he barked, circling her as she struggled to hold a challenging stance. Your enemies won't let up, and neither will I. Leia gritted her teeth, her muscles straining. You're enjoying this, aren't you? A hint of a smile played on Kai's face. Maybe a little. It's been a while since I had someone to teach. Leia huffed, holding the stance a few moments longer before collapsing. And who was your last student? Kai's expression turned guarded. Nobody important. Water break, then we work on your reflexes. As days turned into weeks, Leia gradually chipped away at Kai's hardened exterior. She caught rare glimpses of another side of him, one that knew humor and even showed kindness on occasion. One night, while camping on a desolate moon, she finally voiced the question that had been haunting her. Kai, she asked softly, why did you really help me back in the forest? Kai stared into the crackling fire, silent for a long while. Because, he eventually said, his voice low, for a brief moment, you reminded me of someone I used to be. Someone who still thought they could outrun their past. Leia leaned closer, sensing a rare moment of honesty. And did you ever outrun it? Kai laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't outrun your past, green. You just learn to live with its weight. As he spoke, another memory surfaced. Kai, now a young man, standing before his grandfather in full military uniform. You'll be the greatest admiral the galaxy has ever seen, the old man declared, pride radiating from his voice. And what if I don't want to be an admiral? Kai had asked, though he already knew what his grandfather would say. The old man's eyes hardened. Then you'll be nothing. Is that what you want? To throw away everything I've done for you? The memory faded, leaving Kai with a familiar ache in his chest. He looked over at Leia, seeing the question in her eyes. Let's just say, he said carefully, that sometimes the path chosen for you isn't the one you're meant to follow. Leia nodded, understanding dawning in her expression. Is that why you became what exactly? A criminal? Kai's smile was edged. At one point, the galaxy's most wanted. But that's a story for later. Get some sleep, green. Tomorrow's training will make today look easy. As they continued their journey, Leia began to share pieces of her own past. I suppose you deserve to know why they're after me, Leia said, her golden eyes meeting his. Kai nodded. I've been curious. Not every day I end up on the run with a green-skinned fugitive. Leia took a steadying breath. I worked for the Galactic Council as a data analyst. One day, I came across files implicating high-ranking officials in a massive corruption scheme. They'd been siphoning funds meant for planetary aid and channeling them into illegal weapons development. Kai's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. I couldn't look the other way, Leia continued, so I copied the files, planning to expose them. But they caught on. Now they're hunting me, trying to silence me and recover the information. Let me guess, you've hidden the data somewhere they can't reach? Kai asked. Leia tapped her temple with a faint smile. Right here. My species has eidetic memory. I memorized every detail and destroyed the physical evidence. Kai nodded slowly, beginning to understand. No wonder they're after you. Any names I might recognize? Leia hesitated, then answered. One name stood out, a high-ranking general infamous for his ruthless training methods. They called him the Galactic Hammer. Kai's tone turned cold. My grandfather. Leia's eyes widened. Your grandfather? I had no idea. Kai laughed bitterly. Small galaxy, isn't it? Looks like we both have a reason to bring down the corrupt leadership. With each passing week, their pursuers grew more relentless, and Kai found himself falling back into old habits. The thrill of evading capture awakened something within him that he'd he'd tried to bury for years. During one particularly intense escape, he single-handedly held off a squad of elite troopers, fighting with a ferocity that left Leia both in awe and a little afraid. "You're bleeding," she pointed out as they hurried away. Kai glanced at the gash on his arm and shrugged. "Just a scratch. Barely notice it." Leia shook her head, incredulous. "You know, most people would at least be concerned about an injury like that." Kai's grin was fierce. "I'm not most people, Green. Pain and I go way back." As they journeyed on, Leia began to notice the layers within Kai's actions. A raw violence tempered by moments of surprising gentleness, a hardened cynicism offset by glimpses of deep-seated pain. One evening, after a narrow escape, Leia found Kai meditating, his prayer beads slipping slowly through his fingers. "What do those represent?" she asked softly. Kai didn't open his eyes. "Reminders of lives taken, worlds scarred, mistakes made." Leia settled beside him, her tone gentle. "That sounds like a heavy burden." Kai's eyes opened, meeting hers. "Better to carry it than to forget it. The moment you lose sight of what your actions cost, that's when you truly become dangerous." In that moment, Leia glimpsed the man beneath the tough exterior, a man wrestling with his own darkness, seeking redemption in his own way. As their bond grew, Kai found himself torn. The lure of his past life, the raw power, the thrill of danger, clashed with his longing for peace. After a particularly fierce battle, Kai stood among the fallen, breathing heavily, eyes alight with adrenaline. Leia approached him cautiously. "Kai," she said softly, "it's over. We can leave." He turned to her, and for an instant, she saw something dark and primal flicker in his gaze. Then, as if by force of will, it faded. Kai's shoulders slumped, and the fire in his eyes dimmed. "Yeah," he muttered, "let's go." As they boarded their latest stolen ship, Leia touched his arm gently. "You all right?" Kai was silent for a long moment. "Sometimes," he finally replied, "I wonder if I'm any different from who I used to be. If all this," he gestured vaguely, "is just stalling for time." Leia tightened her hold on his arm. "You are different. The man you used to be wouldn't have helped me, wouldn't have cared." Kai gave a hollow laugh. Maybe I'm just fooling myself, pretending there's something to redeem." As they lifted off, leaving yet another battleground behind, Kai felt himself walking a razor's edge. One side offered the peace he'd fought to find. The other threatened a return to the man he'd once been, the galaxy's most feared. And a part of him, a part he tried hard to ignore, ached for that return. Soon, Kai and Leia faced their most formidable test yet. Caught in a trap, they found themselves stranded on a desolate asteroid, enemies converging from all sides. Kai stood on the edge of a cliff, watching the incoming ships with a strange calm. Leia joined him, a mixture of fear and resolve in her eyes. "So," she said, attempting a light tone, "got any last-minute escape plans?" Kai turned to her, a fierce light in his eyes. "Just one. But it's going to require me to be someone I swore I'd never become again." Leia held his gaze, her own expression steady. "Whatever it takes, I'm with you." Leia's voice was steady as the enemy ships landed, and soldiers began to pour out. Kai closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself, and when he opened them again, she saw a transformation. Gone was the hesitant guide seeking peace. In his place stood the galaxy's most formidable warrior, ready to unleash his full power. His voice dropped to a low growl. "Stay close, Green. And remember, this isn't who I want to be. It's who I have to be." With that, he stepped forward to confront the oncoming horde, the fate of both fugitives hanging in the balance. The asteroid's desolate landscape exploded into chaos as Kai unleashed everything he'd held back. He moved like a storm, each strike precise and lethal. Leia watched in stunned awe as her companion became a deadly blur, cutting down waves of enemies with frightening efficiency. "Is this what you've been holding back all along?" she shouted over the clash, her own movements a shadow of Kai's deadly rhythm. Kai didn't respond, his focus unbreakable. His steel-gray eyes now burned with an inner fire, and he fought with a controlled intensity that left no room for hesitation or mercy. Hours passed, and even Kai's formidable stamina began to wane as he fought through the relentless assault. Finally, as the last enemy fell, Kai stood amid the destruction, breathing heavily but still composed. Leia approached him cautiously. "Kai," she murmured, "are you still you?" He turned to her, and for a brief moment, she saw something ancient and terrifying in his gaze. Then he blinked, and it faded, replaced by exhaustion and a trace of regret. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I'm still me, for better or worse." Once they escaped in a commandeered ship, Leia tended to Kai's few injuries. Her touch was gentle, a stark contrast to the violence they just endured. "So," she said, breaking the heavy silence, "I think we should talk about what happened back there." Kai winced, though whether from the pain or the thought of the conversation, Leia couldn't tell. "Not much to discuss. You saw me at my worst, what I've been running from." Leia's hand hand paused on his arm. What I saw was someone fighting to protect me, to protect us. Yes, it was intense, but you're not a monster, Kai. Kai's laugh was bitter. No, try telling that to the hundreds I've killed, to the worlds I once terrorized. The past is behind you, Leia insisted. What matters now is who you choose to be. Their eyes met and a spark passed between them. Before either could speak, the ship's alarms blared. Looks like we're not in the clear yet, Kai muttered, moving swiftly to the controls. As he navigated through an asteroid field with deft, death-defying maneuvers, Leia found herself admiring his unshakable focus. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, he remained calm and collected. You know, she said, a touch of humor in her voice. For someone who claims to have left the life of a galactic menace behind, you're surprisingly good at it. Kai's lips twitched in a faint smile. Some skills you never lose, Green, like riding a bike. If that bike was a high-speed chase through a minefield, their banter was cut short as a massive cruiser loomed ahead, blocking their path. Kai's eyes narrowed. That's the flagship, he murmured. The big boss is on board. Leia tensed. So, what's the plan? Kai's grin was fierce. We end this, once and for all. What followed was a daring infiltration that pushed both Kai and Leia to their limits. They fought their way through the cruiser's defenses, Kai's unmatched skills complemented by Leia's growing strength and agility. As they approached the bridge, Kai paused, glancing at Leia with uncharacteristic vulnerability. Listen, Green, he began softly. Whatever happens in there, thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Leia's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline. She reached up, gently cupping his face. Always, she whispered, and kissed him. The kiss was brief yet intense, a promise of more to come. When they pulled apart, Kai's gaze held a new warmth. Well, he said, his voice rough, that's definitely motivation to survive this. They burst onto the bridge, catching the enemy leaders off guard. At the center of the room stood the one figure Kai knew too well, his grandfather, the man who had forged him into a weapon. Well, boy, the old general sneered. Finally here to make your family proud? Kai's voice was cold. No, I'm here to end this. All of it. What followed was a battle not only of strength but of will. Kai fought with relentless focus, every move a rejection of the path his grandfather had chosen for him. Leia stayed at his side, her presence a reminder of why Kai was fighting. In the end, it came down to Kai and his grandfather, locked in combat that pushed both of them to their limits. You could have had it all, the old man roared. Power, respect, the galaxy in your grasp. Kai dodged his attack, calm in his response. I found something better, something real. With a final, decisive move, Kai disarmed his grandfather. The old man fell to his knees, his defeat evident. Finish it, he growled, bitterness thick in his voice. Prove you're the weapon I made you to be. Kai stood over him, fist clenched, the moment hanging in tense silence. Slowly, he lowered his hand. No, Kai said quietly, I'm not what you made me, not anymore. With the threat neutralized and proof of the corrupt operation secured, Kai and Leia found themselves, at last, truly free. Standing together on the observation deck, watching stars streak by, Leia turned to Kai, a mix of hope and hesitation in her eyes. So, she began softly, what happens now? Kai was quiet, his gaze distant. I've spent so much time running, he finally said, almost to himself. From my past, from myself. Maybe, it's time to stop running. Leia's heart skipped a beat. What are you saying? Kai turned to her, his eyes filled with a rare openness. I'm saying, maybe it's time to find a quiet corner of the galaxy. Together, if you want. Leia's response was immediate as she pulled him into a deep, passionate kiss. Years went by, and Kai and Leia settled on a tranquil planet far from the galactic core, building a life together. Their love grew deeper, strengthened by shared experiences and mutual understanding. To Kai's ongoing amusement and occasional exasperation, Leia never quite let go of her fascination with human reproduction. You know, she remarked one evening, tracing gentle patterns on Kai's chest, I still can't believe your species does this just for enjoyment. Kai chuckled, pulling her closer. Trust me, Green, the fun's only beginning. Their family grew over the years, eventually welcoming 6 children, each a unique blend of their parents' strengths. Kai, drawing from his own upbringing but softening it with warmth, trained them diligently. One hot afternoon, he watched as his children tackled a challenging obstacle course, his eldest son helping his younger sister through a tricky section. Leia came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Don't you think you're pushing them a bit hard? She asked, concern in her voice. Kai sighed, leaning back into her embrace. The galaxy's a dangerous place. I want them prepared. But the war is over, Leia reminded him gently. We're at peace. Kai turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. Peace isn't promised. I want them ready for whatever comes. Seeing the worry in her eyes, he added softly, but I also want them to know love, to have the childhood I never had. As if on cue, their youngest daughter ran up, her green skin flushed with excitement. "Daddy, watch me do the high jump." Kai's face softened, a proud smile spreading across his face. "All right, sweetheart, show me what you've got." He watched as his daughter tackled the obstacle with confidence, feeling a warmth inside that had nothing to do with the sun overhead. This was what he'd been searching for all along. Not power or fame, but a family, a purpose, a love that anchored him. Later, as the family gathered for dinner, Kai looked around at the faces of his children and Leia, each one a reminder of the life he'd chosen. "You know," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I never thought I'd have this. Any of it." Leia squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with understanding. "Are you happy, my love?" Leia asked, her voice soft. Kai's response was immediate and heartfelt. "More than I ever thought I could be." As night fell and the children drifted off to sleep, Kai and Leia stood together on the porch, gazing up at the stars. The same stars that had once symbolized danger and pursuit now seemed to shimmer with promise. "Do you ever miss it?" Leia asked quietly. "The thrill, the danger?" Kai considered for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at you, at our kids, and I realize I found something far more exhilarating, far more challenging." Leia raised an eyebrow, a playful smile on her lips. "Oh, and what's that?" Kai drew her close, his voice a low murmur. "Living, really living, not just surviving. Loving even when it's terrifying. Being a husband, a father, it's the greatest adventure I could ask for." Leia laughed softly, leaning against his chest. Who would have guessed? The galaxy's most feared man, brought to his knees by love. Kai grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Oh, I wouldn't say I'm entirely tamed, Green. Want a reminder?" Their laughter filled the night air, a sound of pure joy and hard-won contentment. As they made their way back inside, hand in hand, Kai paused, taking one last look at the vast, starlit sky. He thought of the man he'd been, the long, twisting road that had brought him here. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt true peace. The galaxy's most notorious outlaw had found his redemption, not in grand battles or in fame, but in the quiet moments of a life filled with love, purpose, and the ongoing adventure of family. Kai smiled to himself, knowing this was the perfect ending to his story.